Got password?
Pre-Halloween?
Yeah, pre-Halloween eye inspection. Uh-oh, there he comes.
He's already had to
strutting in.
fix it for me once this week.
He's arrived.
Mhm.
How are you?
Well, they're really, really busy, I think. I went
Oh, I
to-
know.
Oh, it's
They are so busy.
chastising
This is-
Mr. Steele
they're
for
busy.
eliminating Lake Tyler. How disappointed I was that it's gone. Can't even see it. It's been erased from
John.
history.
Mayor Webb. We have no one signed up for public
No
comment.
one
I'm not sure how it even
No.
happened, but just right
Tanya.
beside
enough.
where the trailer is, this little ditch. And it kept
Tanya
filling
signed
up
up for
with
public
water
comments.
and stuff.
She doesn't get to speak.
I called it Lake Tyler.
Twice.
2 minutes, 3 minutes? Okay, 2 times.
But they
Well, yeah.
filled it in.
Oh my gosh.
Really started.
I'm completely locked out.
Shoot.
That means this is useless. I don't need it. I got everything right here. I'll just
It's a good opportunity to help them
have
out.
to get him
It
fixed
doesn't even
again.
have to be lengthy, I just think the content needs to be there.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm locked out again. I changed my password. I changed my password. Floyd changed it for me. I changed it again. I got in and now I can't get in on my phone or my iPad to my town email, even though I could earlier today.
Sounds like Henry's been messing with somebody's house.
Right, he might have. Listen, the way it's been at my house this morning, it's hard to tell what's happened.
It might not even be your iPad.
Who knows? Who knows?
That's pretty good.
It's hard to tell. I was just gonna open up my email. I mean, I don't need it right now. If we're holding things up, then we can do it after the meeting. I'm cool. I just feel like I need to do it twice in 48 hours. But even the one that's saved in here with my Face ID on my phone won't open it, and that was right this morning, so something's gone
Maybe
haywire.
they'll say it like
Maybe I've been
it's
hacked.
something you do.
We always blame on
Of course it's, but maybe I've been hacked.
Everything is
I could have been hacked.
I can't read.
It's not the way it's going
We still,
at my house.
Y'all have a fun morning now.
Oh, par for the course.
Okay.
Just, I can get it after the meeting. I don't need it now. Okay. Thank you.
All right,
which part?
so it looks like it's time. Excellent. I'd like to welcome everybody to the September the 24th, get my date straight, mid-monthly work session. Note that there will be an opportunity for the public to speak if anyone signed up, which I don't think there was. But if there was somebody signed up, please address the council, approach the podium when called, state your first, last name, and your complete mailing address. So welcome, everybody. This maybe won't be a 12-minute meeting, but we'll keep rolling. Kim, if you please call the roll.
Mr. Owens,
Here.
Mr. Anderson,
Present.
Ms. Pillion,
Present.
Ms. Quetch,
Here.
and Mayor Webb.
Here. Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you all here. At this point in time, I am open the floor for approval of the agenda.
I'll make that motion.
All right, excellent. I have a motion to approve the agenda as it is from Ms. Pillion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Anderson. Any discussion, council? Hearing none. Kim, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Owens,
Aye.
Mr. Anderson,
Aye.
Ms. Pillion,
Aye.
Ms. Quetch,
Aye.
and Mayor Webb.
Aye. All right, moving right along, public comments. Kim, I understand we don't have anybody signed
Yes,
up?
sir.
All right. Hearing none, we'll move on to petitions and public hearings. I don't think we have anything there either. Proclamations, I see none. And it looks like this is gonna be the Jason Boswell show. So for new business, number 1, discussion regarding the proposed zoning text amendment to Article 9, OI Office and Institutional District, Section 9-2. Same special uses to allow 2-family and multifamily dwellings as a special use. Mr. Boswell.
Thank you, Mayor Webb and Honorable Council. So this is an opportunity to have a discussion about the Planning Commission approving unanimously special use to allow 2-family dwellings and multifamily dwellings in the O&I district. How this got started, we staff has received several inquiries on a few pieces of property in town that are zoned office and institutional. And you probably don't have all the aerials in front of you, but the office and institutional district, it's not a huge district in town, but it does encompass the VHCC Center, which really doesn't affect you all at all because it's state-owned property, so we really don't have any authority over it. But William King Center, Campus Drive, where the new Northgate Pharmacy and that's stuff over there. KVAT is in the office and institutional district. The Tanner White Building off of off of White Street. And then there's a piece of property that's owned off of Empire Drive that is zoned office and institution. So we had several inquiries about the piece of property on Tanner, on White Street and Tanner. So that piece of property has been vacant for quite some time, and the current property owner wanted to renovate it and turn it into dormitories. That project kind of fell through, and he is a absentee landowner. He lives in Florida, so he's just kind of going back and forth. So we've had a few people that have called and asked, if they were to purchase the property, could they utilize it as a multifamily dwelling? It's not currently permitted, so we took that information to the Planning Commission, as Mr. Anderson has heard probably more times than he'd like to count. Had several discussions on it, and so we held a public hearing, and the Planning Commission unanimously approved allowing it as a special use. Staff agreed with that recommendation. It will help to afford property owners to utilize those few parcels that are undeveloped that could be used for multifamily or two-family dwellings in that district. The Planning Commission unanimously approved it as a special use, which also gives them the regulatory authority to be able to determine if that would be an appropriate use for one of those parcels in that district. Now, having said that, we will refer to Article 6 regulations, area regulations, which would be 10,000 square feet for a two-family dwelling, and then 10,000 square feet plus an additional 2,500 square feet per additional unit over 2 dwelling units for multifamily. Anybody have any questions on that?
So, I think I know which building you're speaking of, and do you personally see any other use for this building at this point in time?
Mayor Webb, it's been vacant for quite some time, and I think there's been some back and forth on it. I think that a few people thought maybe doctor's offices were in there previously, but that area's kind of changed, and it's predominantly just residential now. And the thing about the O&I district is they're all surrounded by residential, so it just makes sense. Single-family dwellings are already a permitted use in O&I. It just makes sense to go ahead and allow that. To me,
Jason and I have talked about this several times, and the historic reason why that area existed was because the hospital was
Right.
there. Of course, the hospital's not there anymore, so that particular reason doesn't exist anymore. So it probably needs to be advanced into what it actually is now. So
I think that particular location too, in the center part of town, there's a lack of housing, especially affordable housing. So I think that would be a perfect situation for that to occur in that area.
I agree.
Even you mentioned the campus, I think is the same situation.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
sure they probably wouldn't do that, but that would be also a good place for.
Right. Yeah, it's developed, but in the event that it was to be redeveloped, it affords, the developer to put in some affordable housing, which I personally think that the town is lacking.
Sure.
And it's something that which we will get into that a little bit later with the comprehensive plan discussion, but I mean, that is one of the required content of the comprehensive plan is for us to plan for affordable housing, and I think we need to pay attention to that and afford these property owners to be able to do that.
Well, I don't guess we need to take any action, so guys, are you guys any more questions today of Jason or on this particular issue?
So I think, Mayor, that we should probably just get a consensus of whether we put it on the
Sure.
next agenda for a public hearing.
Sure. So,
We've already scheduled for a public hearing, we've already got it
Yeah.
advertised.
I think that,
Oh, we did,
Got it.
we've already
yeah,
moved forward with it.
but I assume the consensus then is just to move forward. All right.
Yes.
You've got our grace.
All right, thank you all.
Thank
Sure.
you.
You don't care, I'm just gonna
At
stand.
least
Yeah.
get their permission after the fact.
But don't we have to bring it to the first reading anyway, some things get recommended by planning?
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm just gonna leave you standing there since, number 2 will pertain to you and number 3 as well. So the next item on the agenda is number 2, discussion regarding the proposed zoning text amendment to Article 10.B-1 Limited Business District, Section 10.2, same special uses, Article 11.B2 General Business District, Section 11-2, same special uses, and Article 12.B3 Central Business District, Section 12.12, same special uses to allow short-term rentals as a special use. That is a mouthful.
I was gonna say the same
Tongue
thing, Mary.
twister.
It is, yes, sir, it is.
Mr. Boswell.
Thank you, sir. Again, the same type of situation that arose. Staff listened to citizens. We had one specific instance where a property owner was, I'm going to give you the background so you know everything's going on. I've had a few conversations with a few of the council members. Mr. Anderson is well aware of this. Again, he's probably tired of hearing this as well.
He actually appeared before council, I'm pretty sure.
He did, and yeah, and the planning commission on several occasions. But we had a property owner that was issued a homestay permit, which, as you all know, we do have a homestay ordinance in the town, and we allow for short-term transient occupancy of a primary residence for up to 90 days. So there was a permit that was issued to a property owner in error. The property owner decided to sell the property. We got another business license application in from the potential buyer. I made contact with the buyer before the sale of the property and said, I'm not gonna allow this. It's not permitted because it's not your primary residence. So the individual purchased the property regardless, and then has asked that the planning commission take a look at allowing short-term rentals as a special use in all of the commercial districts. Staff made the recommendation to not allow this, and the reasoning being is staff doesn't feel we have enough information, enough data to make a really good judgment call on that type of use in that district. And we also feel that it could potentially cause an affordable housing issue, which staff already feels like we already have in town. That being said, the planning commission voted unanimously to approve it as a special use, because we did go back and forth, as Mr. Anderson can recall. I prefer that it be a special use if we move forward and allow it. That will at least give the planning commission and the town council regulatory authority to allow short terms in these districts as you all see fit. But that's pretty much it in a nutshell. The one thing that I will add is homestay and this type of short-term rental, there's a huge difference. Homestay allows 90 days of occupancy per calendar year. This would allow 365 days a year of short-term transient occupancy.
I think what I'm hearing from you is that we probably need to wait on this. Is that true?
That's my personal opinion.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
What questions do we have, Councilman?
So when you say homestay is that VRBO and,
It goes by a lot of names, but yes, ma'am,
Okay.
that's essentially what it is.
and so that allows people to use it, you can rent that for 90 days at a time or 90 days in a calendar year?
90 days in a calendar year.
Okay.
60 of those days being what the previous council had passed as a type A, which means that the owner has to be present during the stay, and then type B, which is 30 days out of the calendar year where the owner does not have to be present during the stay.
So a significant difference between an investment property that you're just using as Airbnb, for instance, and renting out a room at your house or that sort of thing.
That's
But as background, I'm going to interrupt you, Dr. Owens, but we're going through various amendments to the zoning ordinance and that sort of thing, but one of the sort of sense of fairness, I guess, in this homeowner's mind, what he has expressed is just it's not fair. If you look at what B1 and B2 and B3 allow, R1, R2, R3 allow, there's bed and breakfast, there's homestay, there's what's the one in R3 called?
Tourist homes.
Tourist homes. There are a lot of different things that are allowed in different places that are allowed next door to places where they aren't allowed, and not a lot of rhyme or reason as to why the corner of Park and Tanner, for instance, is in B2 and not B1, where it's allowed, on the same property line is allowed next door as a homestay. I guess
Well,
homestay would be allowed if they, because that's their.
Homestay's not tied to the zoning. It's
Right.
any residential dwelling, as long as it's your primary residence and you agree to the terms of the ordinance to allow for the fire chief to go in and do an inspection. There's some provisions in there that they can't advertise, with signage, things of that nature, because you don't want to make the commercial districts or the residential districts commercial.
That's a
essentially.
homestay.
As a homestay, yes, sir.
And you can do that in any district.
That's correct, yes, sir.
And then, I think the impetus behind it, and none of us, I don't think were around when the homestay ordinance was passed, but from a business perspective, both internally to the town of collecting proper taxes and proper fees and that sort of thing, and for businesses who are in the business of renting out rooms to people, to make it fair of this is what's allowed. You have to identify yourself so it's an equal playing field of you charging and collecting taxes when we have. So I don't have one room where I have to charge $150 a night. You can do it for $25 a night and take all my business because you're just doing it under the radar. So I think that was one of the reasons to pass it. And we're not the only place that has a homestay ordinance, although we were one of the first in
We're
Virginia.
second in the state.
So there's a lot of different interests, there's a lot of different legal issues, a lot of different things that are involved with this. This one particular thing just came to the forefront, and as Mr. Boswell said, that he told him before, he did it anyway. But I could see, the practicality of, hey, I can see they're doing something that you're telling me I'm not allowed to from my front porch, and it's just not fair.
Right.
But to Ms. Quetch's point, there are lots of things in the process of trying to draw all these things together in a comprehensive zoning ordinance, and I think from Mr. Boswell's point of view, doing it sort of piecemeal because there's one particular issue that somebody's upset about, not the best zoning practice, all things being equal.
That's
But
correct.
Planning Commission presumably took all those things into account and passed it, but that's a little bit more of the background, and I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Well, no, that's not for me. I have rental properties myself, and so I'm not real, happy when I'm discouraged from doing things that I'd like to do with my property.
Absolutely.
So I can see the advantage of this, but on the flip side, I think we lose a sense of community when we have all transient people all the time. They don't participate in the community, they don't go to church here, they don't shop at the grocery store, they don't play at the ball field necessarily. So that would be my concern, is are we gonna lose a sense of community of people not living in the neighborhood full term? So, and going back to the affordable housing, I don't know if there's a glut, if there's a need, or I don't know if you guys do or not. I mean,
I would say so, and I talked to Mr. Marini and Mayor Webb earlier today. I think Tanya's working on a housing study, is that correct? That would probably shed some light on where we're at as far as affordable housing is
So I'm
concerned.
conflicted. I see both sides.
That's
And,
why we need to wait, probably.
Well, I mean, and it's fine that the planning commission didn't go with staff's recommendation. That happens all the time. It's great to have a healthy conversation about, they just didn't agree with that. And I think they leaned toward, they didn't want the property owner to feel like that he was being held hostage. And I understand that. I understand both sides of it. But in my perspective, in my job, I have to think about the entire town and not just one property owner. And affordable housing is something that I feel like we're lacking, and I think that if we had more data, that I would be proven right on that.
particularly in this inner part of town, there's no housing really, affordable housing.
Sure.
There isn't.
No, I would agree with that 100%, because I also own a rental house, and it's difficult to find rental properties. There's not a lot of affordable housing, period.
I did have something I wanted to add. I agree with Dr. Owens. I told you Dr. Owens, he called you Dr. Owens.
Mike's
About
fine.
the concern about the sense of community. I think we are, you know, a tourist destination, so to speak. You know, tourism is important to this community, which means we want people to come and visit. We want people to come and stay overnight and go to the Barter and ride the Creeper Trail and do all the other things you could do around this area. But we are a community too, and so we want to make sure that we keep that sense of community. But one of the things that I am a little concerned about is the message that it's sending to some of our brick and mortars, hotels that have been struggling, and I don't know what the impact of this is going to be, and that's why it'd be good to see data on this, and do some more research on it. You know, we have businesses that provide these services in town that are struggling, and by doing this right now, is that kind of sending the wrong message? We're gonna open up, you know, more of that type of lodging overnight and not, you know, discourage people from staying at hotels. So those are kind of things that I get concerned about. I'm not saying that ultimately this is something that we wouldn't have some form of in the future, but I also think that when we redo the zoning code, we're gonna be looking at many new zoning districts possibly too, potentially. And I don't mean like overcomplicating it, but we might decide, hey, where that particular area is zoned, it might get condensed with the neighboring zoning districts. We're gonna have to look at this. The planner, the consultants will have to get involved. So the zoning districts might even not look exactly the same that they are now. So that's why I thought maybe piecemealing this now might be a little bit premature. Maybe we get some more data, get some housing study information, get some planners who have some more experience and best practice of this in other communities across the
So
state.
how do we find that data, get that perfect balance of rental properties and affordable housing? I mean,
Yeah.
short-term rental and
I believe it's out there. That's why we've got to work with somebody who's,
because I'd hate to create
yeah.
a problem.
Oh, I agree with you. I
So-
agree with you.
And
We
that's
already
a
have
significant difference too, to make the distinction between rental property, which is allowed in this district now, for over a long period of time, it has to be 90 days
Yeah,
at a time.
the town doesn't regulate long-term rental. It's anything over 30 days is considered
30 days.
long-term. This is
And,
anything 30 days.
and
less.
transient rental, so that distinct, to address the issue you're talking about, I think that somebody renting it for 30 days at a time advances the ideas that you're talking about, and maybe a little bit different for somebody who's just here at night, but.
What about special uses permit, just in case nobody really understands what that means? Does that give everybody the opportunity? Does this set a precedent in this particular zoning area?
It gives I would prefer a special use being
Okay.
allowed at this point if we move forward and you decide to approve it, as it has been submitted and approved by the planning commission. And that's something that we talked about. If it was a permitted use by right, I mean, anybody could just buy a property and do it, and it's permitted, and we can't do anything about it. Special use gives you all regulatory authority to take a look at it. If the planning commission says, yes, that looks good to us, I think that would be a good place for short term. And then that comes before you all, and you get to make the decision on whether it moves forward or not.
But it doesn't apply to everybody,
No.
so each
Oh,
person
they have to
apply
apply
for
for it,
special
yes, sir.
use, okay.
Yep,
In those particular zoning districts.
yes, in the commercial districts.
Mr. Anderson, though, you were on that committee, correct? And it was voted unanimously?
Unanimous.
Were you all concerned about creating a affordable housing problem or not? I mean, did that ever come up, or was there a study?
We talked about it, but not to that full extent. You know, we're just trying to pretty much solve that problem, you know, ease the frustrations,
Right.
but not to the fullest detail.
Of course, I don't want to discourage tourism either.
Right.
Sure.
Right. It's a fine line. I mean,
Yeah, that
you
is
know, it's a-
definitely, that's a delicate balance.
It's one of
it
those
really
things
is,
that,
yeah.
you know, needs a little, you know, in my opinion, it needs a little bit more thought, before we move forward with it.
So can we suggest doing a study, or has there been a study done, or is there one in
Well,
progress, or?
I
when-
think the way that we'd like to address it is in the zoning ordinance update. We were currently working on, my colleague, Mr. Gregg, is working on an RFP to put out, to send out to, get some bids back for doing a complete overhaul of the zoning ordinance and the subdivision ordinance. After the Berkeley Group did our land use evaluation, we are lacking, and we're very far behind, state code wise. So there's a lot of things that we could be doing a lot simpler, a lot easier, and I think that's the time to address it, because the data will be there, the consultant will gather the data, and will know, is this right for Abington?
I don't think this is like, to me, this is not an immediate urgency
Mhm.
to to address this issue? I mean, I understand with this individual, it's a concern, so my thought is, well, why can't we just wait, you know,
So-
when we go through the zoning code and look at it more comprehensively?
Well, be that as it may, and I'm not, we don't have to.
There's
vote
no
on
decision
anything
made
today.
tonight,
There's
no,
no
sir.
decision making. So
Just discussion.
I guess so that for time's sake and so that we all sort of have an understanding, what's the next step? Do we have it scheduled for a public hearing at the October the 4th meeting?
Yeah, I think you move forward with the public hearing, but then you
And
ultimately make that
At
decision.
that point in time,
then.
we'll hear what the public has to say, and if we decide to move forward with, you know, we can take action then.
I mean, you still have to progress to a first and a second reading if
Right.
it is going to be
Right.
adopted, so you can make that decision at the next meeting. if you
Okay,
want.
okay.
Yeah.
Talking about the study as far as changing the zonings that you're talking about, that we have now,
Mhm.
how long of a process would that be? 6 months, years?
Reaching out to a few consulting firms that we've used in the past, it seems like that we're looking at a 12 to 18-month process
Okay.
to do the entire
Pretty
update.
complex process, I would think, yeah.
We want to do public engagement too.
A lot of public engagement, stakeholder engagement, I mean, you know, that's what we need to do.
Sure, sure.
We've been talking about it for a year at least.
Well, this council's gonna get it done.
Yeah, it would've been great to have done it all at one time, comprehensive plan and the zoning subdivision ordinance
Well, I
update,
mean, we
but
started
that's,
it with the sign code, that was kind of one that we took,
it's the first thing that,
kind of took apart
yeah.
because that kind of can stand alone on its own regardless of zoning districts, and so that was really the first step. And there's obviously been a lot of changes in, case law and, you know, about regulating content, and that was sort of probably the most pressing one that could be done on the front end, the zoning code and the zoning districts, and, that's a lot more complicated.
And I did
drawn-out process.
I did some research for Mr. Moraney earlier in the week and found out that like June of '93 was the last time that zoning update had happened, so.
A comprehensive,
Yes,
Right,
entire
zoning
comprehensive
code, yeah.
update. It's been piecemeal, there's been amendments, obviously, but to look at it as a whole.
Well, I think we should tap the brakes on this
Okay.
and slow it down.
Well, like I said, procedurally, I guess we've got the
Nothing to
public
do,
hearing
just
scheduled,
something,
so we'll-
food for thought until the public hearing, and then you can make the.
so when you read that statement, shall this proposal be rejected, you might actually get a different response.
maybe get a different response than normal. Well, did you guys have any other questions at this time, or are we gonna? Okay, all right. Well, that being said, we're gonna move on to number 3, Mr. Boswell, discussion regarding proposed amendment to the Town of Abington Comprehensive Plan pursuant to Virginia Code Section 15.2-2229. Mr. Boswell.
Thank you, Mayor Webb. I'm sure you all are tired of listening to me talk, because I'm getting tired of talking. But we've been engaged in this process for the last 20 months. And I really think that EPR, the consulting firm that we've used, with the collaboration with the steering committee and planning commission's input and stakeholder input, I think we've given you all a really good document. And Mr. Todd Gordon, the project manager of from EPR, was gracious enough to drive down all the way from Charlottesville to give you all an introduction to the plan and answer any questions that you may have. And I'm going to turn it over to him.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Well, thank you very much for having me. My name's Todd Gordon. I'm one of the planners at EPR who's worked on this plan, but just one. We've all had a pleasure, great pleasure to have worked with the town on this document. I don't want to start too simplistically. It sounds like you're a council that's very engaged with planning issues, but the bottom line is the comprehensive plan is a state-required document. It is a vision and a strategic plan for the next 20 years of Abington's future. It is a guide. It is a non-legal guide in that it doesn't hold the force of law the way the zoning ordinance does, but it's meant to be a guide to the many little decisions you will make for 20 years, including whether to make small shifts in zoning language. So it is that strategic vision, and we came into this as we come into most of these plans with an eye for first learning the community, for learning the background and the work that you've done prior to the comprehensive plan, and spending time with the citizens of Abingdon to try to understand vision and goals for the future. In this case, we spent a little less time in town than we would have preferred because since March we were not able to. And so later in the process, while we had some in-person workshops early in the process, later in the process we used a survey to get the public input on our draft document once we arrived at that stage. That should have been an in-person discussion, and we wish it had been, but that's how it worked at the time. I'll say that the comprehensive plan, while it's a non-legal guide to your decision-making, it is very important in a number of ways. In one very major way, and a major shift from your previous comprehensive plan, is that comprehensive plans are now very closely tied to transportation funding through Virginia's Smart Scale program, which decides which projects are funded when and for how much. And so that has been a major focus of this plan, transportation projects. I'll say that overall, while nothing in this plan is a dramatic shift for Abingdon, there are a lot of strategies that are very important to the future of the county, future of the town. One of those, I think you're already touching on, and that is that the zoning ordinance could use some work. The zoning ordinance is your primary tool for implementing the comprehensive plan because it is the legal regulation and requirement that enforces the vision in the plan for future growth. Some of the most important things that you'll find in that plan, and it does become a lengthy document. It's just over 100 pages. We hope it's organized in a way that it's not too terrible to read, but it is quite a bit to read. I think some of the most important elements are transportation and land use maps, which show potential future vision for transportation projects and for changes in land use. Especially the future land use map dovetails really right into the zoning map as an important first step. So I think you'll see some big items in there in the strategies that are also proposed. The big push early on was to establish a vision and goals for the town by speaking with elected and appointed leaders as well as citizens, and then to come up with the strategies that will implement those goals. So I think there are opportunities to promote the right kind of growth through the zoning ordinance in a way that satisfies your economic needs, broadens the local economy, provides for affordable housing, as you've already discussed this afternoon. There's an opportunity, I think, suggested in this document for regulations that might allow cluster residential development as one way to preserve the open space that remains within the town, and it's very important, particularly along the edge that interfaces with Interstate 81. Finally, I think we spent some time in conducting this plan and especially assembling that future land use map to select potential sites for higher density development, the type of two-family and multifamily properties that you've talked about, especially near the downtown, where they can have the biggest effect on affordability for the town, but also on the vitality of the business district downtown. People who live close to downtown patronize businesses downtown, and hopefully continue to drive both the local economy and tourist economy for the town. So I will not wax further, but it has been our pleasure to work on this document. I think we're very happy with the way that it's turned out, but I'm here to answer any questions, provide any further detail that you'd like to have at this time. I very much appreciate your time.
I thought you were gonna read the whole thing too, so I'm kinda disappointed.
Happy to.
I'm teasing.
It did turn out to 100 pages, and that is a lot to read.
I think you did an excellent job.
Thank you.
Yes.
You know, everybody involved in the whole process, so I've been pleased with what I've read. You know, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will have to say, and I told Mr. Boswell this earlier, I read most of it, and it is organized very well. You guys did a spectacular job. It is an easy read, and it's not all super easy to read, but it's kind of thick material, but it's organized very well, and I'm very pleased.
very much.
Thank you.
Any questions, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, any discussion you'd like to have, I'd love to listen to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, council, any discussion or questions for Mr. Boswell at this point in time?
Jimmy just mentioned next steps. We'll be having the first public hearing, first reading, the first
October 4th.
October. When is that?
4th, I
October
think.
5th.
Is it 4th, 5th?
Fourth?
Fifth, sorry, I've been saying that with all of you.
And I won't be able to be as succinct as Mr. Gordon, but I think you all are pretty happy with the document that's been provided. I can't thank EPR, Todd, Vlad enough for the work that they did on it. And I'm pretty proud of it. It's my first one. I'm pretty proud of it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
again.
you.
Very nice work. All right. That moves us to resolutions. We have none. And then unfinished business. So we have discussion regarding the 2020 CDBG Urgent Need Grant. Ms. Triplett.
Good afternoon,
Hello.
Mayor and Council. I just wanted to bring you kind of up to date on the CDBG grant that we applied for. We have been approved for up to $200,000. So we are working toward getting under contract with that. So at your October 5th meeting, you will have some paperwork, hopefully. Mr. Bell approves everything to look at. And
It's unlikely, but hey,
some pretty strict guidelines to move forward with receiving these monies. So we're trying to move through all of the correct steps. We hope to be under contract by mid-October. We have 1 year to complete the project from the date that it's contracted. We will be creating a management team, so they have requested that maybe a council member be on that, so you guys can kind of be thinking about that. We're going to contract with the EDA to disperse the checks so that the restaurants, once they provide the meals, they don't have to wait for the 10 days that sometimes it takes for the town to get checks out. So we'll be doing an MOU with the EDA for them to be able to provide that service. My thinking on the applications for the restaurants would be locally owned, sit-down restaurants that served our community pre-COVID and who were affected by COVID. So I want to get
repeat
you.
that one more time, seriously.
Okay, so locally owned,
Uh-huh.
sit-down dining establishments in Abingdon that served our community pre-COVID
Okay.
and that were affected by COVID.
Okay.
She's only saying the pre-COVID because we've had a few restaurants obviously open up
Sure,
and our
sure. No, I
preference
just
was
want to make sure I understood.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, no,
So I want to get your thoughts on, see if you all have any objections to that or any thoughts on that, because the grant, in my mind, would work that we would be helping the businesses that were here before COVID to recap some of their revenues that they lost and to maybe help put some of their employees back to work.
Sure. Well, council, what kind of questions do we have now? Or comments?
I think it's a good idea that we use locally owned restaurants, so.
Are
I
the
agree.
restaurants open now for sit-down?
Yes.
And you're-
In this grant, they wouldn't be providing meals in their restaurants, they would be providing to-go meals. But because COVID forced the closing of the dining establishments, and you couldn't go in, they had to do the curbside and,
Sure.
you know, and then they had to provide
They were the
outdoor
most
dining,
negatively
so it's,
impacted.
Yeah.
so.
It's probably fair to say then that most of these fast food chains that have drive-throughs previous to COVID did just fine, I mean, for the most part, did just fine during COVID, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
and some better.
Better,
Right.
yeah.
So we're trying to target the locally owned businesses that pour that money back
Well,
into
what I
town.
would really love is if the families could go sit down in these restaurants
It'd be
and
pretty
eat a
cool,
meal
but-
together. I mean, it probably can't happen, but it would be wonderful.
And
They
we,
can't just not do this grant.
It's just, it's a good thought.
yeah.
Any Any other comments or questions, council?
We talked about 80 meals, 80 meals at one point in our conversation, and we have had some conversation with Faith in Action, and we're getting a list of the families that they serve and how many are in each household. So it very well could be more than 80 meals per time, so once we have that data. And we can, up to the $200,000 can be used to pay the restaurants. It can also help our partner who is distributing the meals pivot to curbside pickup if they need equipment to keep the food warm or cold, or to continue their food bank services. We can help them with equipment on that as well.
And we had Jimmy and Tanya and Brenda, I guess, all participated in a conference call with 80 stakeholders, various ABC, XYZ organizations who are involved in this. Is a pretty complicated thing. And I think that we got all our questions answered, and they had all their questions answered. My primary concern was making sure that we didn't sign anything saying or promising that we were going to do something that we were not going to do. This is sort of an extreme subset of where the money is coming from, and we're applying it to a sort of unique use. And all their things, all their forms and agreements and that sort of are geared towards housing, and that's not what we're doing. So we clarified that, and I think we're all on the same page about that. But it was Tanya's idea to make sure that the EDA was involved, so the restaurants got paid up front and weren't having to float some of these things. So yeah, staff did a great job.
So there'll be a committee organized to pick restaurants or invite
We'll have to put that
restaurants?
out for bid. That's what I want to get your thoughts on, that if we word it, that it's locally owned, sit-down dining establishments that were here pre-COVID. So that way if you get any questions, you'll be able to answer why. And then we will take in those applications and set up a schedule or a calendar for those guys to participate on 3 days a week. But we will have a management committee that will meet once a month, and we can meet virtually. So they did ask that a council member would serve on that committee.
And the food will be distributed at the food banks, right? For the people
Yes.
that go there for
Yes.
help? Okay.
Yeah, so the restaurants will prepare those meals, they'll deliver them to the food bank. Then the folks who are already patrons of the food bank and come in there to pick up their boxes of food would then get a hot meal for anybody in their household
To take home, not to eat there.
to take home. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. They could eat there if they'd like.
I mean, they could take it back to the business if they were.
Yeah.
So I guess what you need from us then is a consensus that we're good with the terms, if you will.
Yes.
Before she solicits those.
Yeah.
Before I solicit
Locally
for the
owned
restaurants, I wanna make
restaurants,
sure
yeah.
you're okay with that I would like,
Okay.
in my mind, it would be the folks who were in business when
Sure.
COVID hit, that were affected by this and had to lay their staff off,
Right.
and when I word that application, that's what.
Okay.
And you've talked to all the restaurants around that you're considering that
I've talked to a few, yes,
Okay.
and I have enough partners to,
Good.
yeah.
Good.
Well, council, I guess we need is everybody okay with that? Do I have a consensus? I'm seeing a lot of shaking heads that are in a positive way, so I think you've got our grace.
I just wanna say that this was all Tanya, this thing.
Thank
This
you,
would never
Tanya.
even came
Fantastic.
together if she didn't pursue it.
It's true,
So,
fantastic
I shouldn't
idea.
wanna take the credit, but this was entirely her doing.
Thank you.
I think it's
Tanya.
great.
Yeah, it's great.
He's still in that, so if I mess up something, it'll be.
Now, that's a tremendous amount of money to pour back into the community. Honestly, that's a fantastic, fantastic cause. Thank you.
Well, I am passionate about these small businesses being successful, so thank you all for allowing me to move forward with it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tanya.
All right, moving right along, miscellaneous business, and communication from the town manager. What do we have, Jimmy?
Well, I didn't say anything last meeting, so I probably should say something this meeting. Coombe Center is online, still open the first week of October, so, I know some of you might have gotten, that note I sent about, if you couldn't do it on the day that I'd said, just feel free to call, Jennifer or Melisha, and they can set up a walkthrough and just show some of the, improvements that have been made and the changes in the setup, so it's really, really nice, I think, what they've done in there, so. Unless anybody has any questions about anything else they have on their mind.
Nope. Ms. Triplett?
I do have one more thing to share. We have been able to put some part-time staff at the Creek Trail Welcome Center.
Okay, yeah.
So they're open Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, offering information to folks who are on the Creeper Trail. This Sunday, we have a scheduling conflict and we haven't been able to get all the staff brought up to speed, so it will only be open this Sunday from noon to 5. All the other times we've been open from 9 to 5, so.
Excellent.
And the way that we have the setup there, it's kind of open, so they're kind of sitting on the porch, so with all the social distancing concerns that we have, which actually is kind of nice because they're visible, and so far, I think it's worked out pretty well.
So they're not volunteers, they're actual
Yeah, we
staff?
we brought back a few of
Okay.
the part-timers, yeah.
I had somebody who commented on Facebook
Um,
that there were volunteers
Yes.
working, so
We'll take volunteers, I think, but,
Yeah.
but I think,
We're working toward that.
we
I saw that post too, because
Yeah.
I've been sharing the
we
original.
had, we had some people who, and these were 2 people that were previously,
that's
laid
great,
off.
good.
And, you know, they've worked there for a long time and they know the community well, and we wanted to offer, those individuals the opportunity to come back, and so far it's worked, so.
And then
So
the-
just if you were to get any questions this Sunday, it will be noon to 5
Noon to 5,
instead of 9
okay.
to 5. But we hope that we get some, one more person on board who
Sure.
can fill in, and that we will be able to continue the 9 to 5.
Okay. Great.
Awesome.
Okay, then, yeah, thanks for remembering.
Anything
That's
else?
all I got.
All right. What about council member reports? Does anybody have a report tonight? None? And Donna just whispered in my ear, and I remembered, it's safe to say now that the Creeper Trail bathrooms are open?
Oh, yeah, Creeper
Yeah.
Trail. We didn't want to advertise that, but now that you've said it.
Hey, catch out of the bag. Well, I was out there.
No,
I
we
saw
did.
it, so-
Kevin and his staff worked really fast. We opened it up, I think it was it 2 weeks ago, John? About 2 weeks ago, they were open, so the months, the fall are pretty heavy for trail users.
Oh, yes.
So, we had learned that the Forest Service had recently opened up their restrooms like the week before, but then they had an issue with their vendor for cleaning. They had to close down briefly, so I don't know if they're back open or not, but I think it was the right time to do it, and we have the staff in place now to do it, so.
Excellent. Good news. Well, I don't think we have a closed session scheduled, so if nobody has anything else, meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Not too bad, wasn't too painful, was it?
Good.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, it's great.